Last time, I started talking about some of the stronger aspects of Dragon Ball GT, leaving off on the notion that the Baby Saga, while having an incredible foundation for its story, was ultimately executed in a somewhat lackluster fashion. Similarly, the Shadow Dragon Saga, which concluded the series, is also built on a foundation that practically serves an intriguing narrative on a silver platter. Basically, after the residents of Hell are returned there and the portal between there and Earth is closed at the end of the Super 17 saga, Goku and company gather Earth's Dragon Balls once again in order to wish away the apocalyptic events going on as a result of the natural balance of the planet being completely out of whack. However, they find all 7 of them to be cracked, and when they decide to try and summon Shenron anyway, a black smoke dragon appears and splits up into 7 Shadow Dragons, each one in possession of a Dragon Ball. The reason this happens is because the balls themselves were constantly being tracked down and reused within small spans of time, never allowing the negative energy inside the balls to be dispersed, a process which can take centuries. Each of the Shadow Dragons was actually brought into being and their personality codified by a particular wish. The more selfless the wish, the more ruthless and evil one of the Shadow Dragons would be. The potential of this story arc should be obvious. Goku, Bulma, and the others should have been reeling from the realization that all the good they had done with the Dragon Balls and their over-reliance on them to solve their problems could now mean the end of the world, possibly the universe, as they know it, and could even call into question if using them so regularly was worth it after all. While Goku does feel personally responsible for abusing them over the years, and everyone pretty much blames Bulma for inventing the Dragon Radar that allowed them to track the balls down so easily in the first place, the issue isn't ever brought up again. Then again, when it comes to Goku, deep thought and personal reflection are as fleeting as the wind, but it still ends up leaving a big hole in what could have been a much stronger, more introspective narrative that puts the actions of our heroes over the past several decades under the microscope and in a whole new light. It also certainly doesn't help that we get Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, and he's more concerned with goofing off than doing much fighting. Sure, he purifies the Earth's atmosphere by reversing the power of Omega Shenron's negative karma ball, and he was easily the most powerful character in the entire franchise up to this point in its history, canon or not, but he feels completely and utterly wasted. That's not to say that this saga didn't have its strong points, however. Nova Shenron, the 4-star dragon, ended up being an interesting enough character for the brief time he was around, as the wish that created him was a particularly selfish one, i.e. King Piccolo wishing for his youth to be restored. This made Nova turn out to be an honorable combatant and, seeing as how he's the last enemy Goku converts into an ally, sort of a quasi-wish fulfillment character for Goku himself, as Nova held the 4-star ball which Goku strongly associates with his youth, family, and long-deceased grandfather. So, if you think about it, Goku could be associating Nova with his grandfather. I mean, think about it. Grandpa Gohan did teach Goku some initial martial arts, manners, honors, and kindness. The last time Goku saw Grandpa Gohan, in the manga at least, was all the way back when he was a child and the two fought at fortune teller Baba's palace. Gohan surrendered, but not before putting Goku into submission by grabbing his tail, telling his grandson to work on having his tail work for him rather than against him. Here, about 40 years or so later, not only is Goku fighting alongside someone in whom he can see as adoptive grandfather, but also feel like he can show him just how strong he's gotten. And what's the best way to prove that? Why, with Super Saiyan 4, of course. Goku's tail was what allowed him to become a Golden Great Ape and then a Super Saiyan 4 to defeat Baby. Thus, Goku, after 40 years, finally got his tail to work for him rather than against him, and in his eyes, he finally gets to show that to his grandpa, at least symbolically. And then there's the ending, which people seem to be split between loving it as a heartwarming and tear-jerking episode that closes the book on Goku's story, and hating it because Goku doesn't get to finally settle down with his loved ones for good. Basically, after Omega Shenron is defeated, the real Shenron appears and reiterates on why the Shadow Dragons appeared in the first place. He tells our heroes that he'll be leaving this world and taking the Dragon Balls with him for about 100 years, and asks Goku if he would like to come with him. Goku accepts on the conditions that Shenron grant one last wish, to restore Earth to its rightful state, and that he be able to make a couple stops to say his goodbyes along the way. Shenron agrees, Goku hops on the dragon, he entrusts the defense of Earth to Vegeta, and they're off. This leads to a few scenes where Shenron and Goku fly by some of Goku's old friends, and Goku even stops by Kame House to see Master Roshi and the newly revived but still elderly Krillin, his best friend, one last time. He also makes a brief stop in Hell to say goodbye to Piccolo, and there's a long story for why Piccolo is in Hell. Back on Earth, Goku's clothes are left behind and taken by his granddaughter Pan as a memento of her ascended grandfather, a gesture which can be read as being a parallel between Goku and the 4-star Dragon Ball being his last tie to his own late grandfather. The Dragon Balls are absorbed into Goku's body, Goku merges with Shenron, and 100 years later, Goku Jr., Goku's great-great-grandson and Pan's grandson, is fighting in the World Martial Arts Tournament wearing his ancestor's old gi. Again, the parallels with Goku and the 4-star Ball are on display, and they're exemplified even further if you watch the TV special A Hero's Legacy, but that's for another day. This episode is already pretty loaded. Pan, now over a century old, sees her grandfather, now an adult once again, in the stands, but thinks she's seeing things when she turns back and doesn't see him again. Turns out it really was him though, and the audience is treated to a montage of clips from Goku's long life, followed by Goku's cheery final words to us.
Till we meet again, guys!
God, it brings tears to my eyes every time. While I can understand the side of those who believe that Goku should have been able to finally be with his friends and family, after all, he was away from them for several years training Oob, and he just saved all of creation from what was essentially their own negligence. Goku was never a character who put a strong emphasis on family to begin with. Sure, he cares about Chi-Chi, Gohan, Goten, Videl, Mr. Satan, and Pan, and he would and has given his own life for the sake of his family and friends, but Goku's ultimate goal in life isn't to finally have peace, it's to overcome the next challenge. Vegeta is the only one of his friends who understands this, being a full-blooded Saiyan himself, and accepts Goku's departure upon realizing that he's going to be spending all that time training, an activity which Goku spends most of his free time doing anyway, with his friends and family not only being understanding of it, but also supportive. Was it a dick move on Goku's part to just up and leave them on the spot without really telling anyone but Vegeta what he was going to be doing? Yeah, it kinda was, but it wasn't totally out of character. So on the whole, while Dragon Ball GT did have its fair share of problems, the ideas and concepts it was working with were actually pretty solid ones. The only things that really bogged them down were the writers not realizing the full potential of the stories they were trying to tell, reusing some old concepts and plots, and having the series being kicked off with a major plot hole. I honestly think that it wouldn't be a bad idea to revisit and retool the Baby and Shadow Dragon sagas and the currently ongoing Dragon Ball Super. Until then though, all we can really do is reflect. Whether you like it or not, Dragon Ball GT was and still is a significant part of the franchise's history, regardless of its canonical status. If you don't like it and choose to pretend like it doesn't exist, then here's what you can do. Acknowledge its existence, explain the problems you have with it, and move on. If you feel like GT was a problem or a mistake, ignoring it can allow its mistakes to be repeated, but examining it to figure out what did go wrong can help prevent repeats of it in the future. But at least we can all agree that Dragon Ball Evolution was total garbage, right? See you next time!